Senator Padilla.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I referenced in my opening remarks, there's significant reporting just in the last several months alone by NBC News and the New York Times calling our attention to the labor violations found by the Department of Labor, migrant children being exploited for their labor. So in response to the reporting, I actually partnered with Senator Hickenlooper to send letters to 27 CEOs, CEOs of the major companies accused of the wrongdoing in that most recent round of reporting. Our letter demanded that it take immediate steps to stop the ill treatment of children. And according to the findings and the reporting, migrant children have reportedly been working in unsafe conditions, in hazardous conditions, and in other unlawful circumstances. We asked the CEOs to carefully examine their hiring procedures. We asked them to examine their workplace safety policies. And we asked them to review their compliance with wage and hour laws to prevent any further exploitation of children, and to share with us their assessments. Now, their responses were, how should I say this, overwhelmingly lackluster, often filled with finger pointing. Not our fault, it's a subcontractor issue. Not our fault, it's a subsidiary issue. Anything but actually taking accountability. One would think that the Fair Labor Standards Act would protect all children from labor exploitation at all levels of the supply chain, but there's clearly a breakdown. My first question is for Ms. Gerstein. Can you explain the challenges that exist in enforcing child labor protections at all levels of the supply chain, and what would you encourage Congress to do to ensure that children are better protected?
So you're absolutely right. The lead corporations do point a finger and deflect responsibility to suppliers and subcontractors and staffing agencies. The Fair Labor Standards Act defines employee very broadly, but case law treats it very narrowly and makes it very hard to get accountability up the supply chain. What is needed, the challenges in enforcing child labor protections, one is the funding limitations on the Federal Department of Labor. They're grossly underfunded relative to the need. Another challenge is the difficulty in going up the supply chain. These cases also are very resource intensive and difficult to enforce. If you look at the Federal Department of Labor's PSSI case, it was an investigation that involved they found over 100 minors working at multiple states. They did surveillance and warrants and multi-team investigations and interviewing many reluctant witnesses. These cases are hard to do, and the Department of Labor really needs the resources to do them effectively. In terms of liability up the supply chain, strict liability for for the lead corporations for violations in their supply chain, or at least strict liability when there are repeat or widespread violations, and also government contracting. The government can use its contracting abilities to not do business with lead corporations that have these violations in their supply chains.
Thank you. Now, on a different note, I do want to tell my Republican colleagues that there is actually an agreement. It's undeniable that we need to crack down on dangerous cartels and traffickers who exploit children. It's absolutely necessary. However, we must also recognize that parents and relatives who flee persecution should not be treated as criminals merely for trying to keep their children alive. Implementing policies, as the last administration did, that aims to criminalize these individuals inevitably leads to family separations, inflicting harm upon children, leaving them even more susceptible to exploitation. Policies such as the Title 42 public health order, right? It was a public health order, not an immigration law, which denied adults the chance to seek asylum, often left parents facing an agonizing choice. They were forced to decide between either staying with their children and risking continued persecution for the entire family, or providing at least their children with an opportunity for stability and safety. So this policy created a dilemma that had profound consequences for many, many families, often leading to the heart-wrenching decisions and the exacerbation of vulnerabilities. Ms. Davidson, you testified that the continuous application of the Homeland Security Act of 2002, the TVPRA, and Flores is critically important to protecting kids from exploitation. Can you explain why a break in procedure is proven to be so harmful?
Yeah, absolutely. When we're talking about these protections, this is the bare minimum. We're talking about things like giving a child access to food and water and to be held in humane conditions. And if we were to roll back any of those protections and not look at children in terms of their best interest, and to make sure that they are in the least restrictive setting, that they're unified with their sponsor quickly, if we roll those back, we are putting children in grave danger. We saw over half a dozen children die in CBP custody under the Trump administration. And so we really have to prioritize these protections and make sure that they are in place for unaccompanied children.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Senator.